Hi guys, it's me, CHD, and welcome to another episode of the podcast where today we are reviewing what happened at the Chinese Grand Prix weekend that obviously was just completed yesterday. And we had quite a bit going on after the Grand Prix that did change the result of the race, which of course I'll get onto in a moment. But it was a decent weekend. I think the sprint and the qualifying on Saturday was really the highlight of the weekend. The race on Sunday was pretty boring. One of the most boring Chinese Grand Prix you're ever going to get. And it was simply because the hard compound tyres just were lasting way too long. But that's Pirelli's fault, not the car's fault. But yeah, it was a competitive weekend. But ultimately, one team rose above them all. And it was the team we all expected. But they didn't end up winning by as much of a margin as we expected, which I think is a good thing going forward. But post-race, both Ferrari cars and the Alpine of Pierre Gasly were disqualified. We'll get more into that later, but that of course does affect the race results quite a bit because Gasly on track finished in 11th, I believe, and the two Ferraris obviously finished in 5th and 6th, so the race results are quite a bit different. So let's go through the official top 10 results of the Chinese Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri taking his first win of the year. Lando Norris in second, just about hanging on with his brake issues towards the end. Piastri taking McLaren's obviously second win of the season and McLaren's first 1-2 of the year as well. George Russell third, great weekend he had and another really good result considering Mercedes still lacking pace compared to the ultimate fastest car McLaren. Max Verstappen in fourth, decent result for him, and then because of the two Ferraris being disqualified, Esteban Ocon fifth for Haas. Who would have expected that after the Australian Grand Prix where they were nearly 4 seconds a lap off the pace of McLaren, and in this Grand Prix weekend just gone, we're a lot better off. Clearly have fixed some of the issues that were plaguing them in Melbourne. They still have the issue of having quite a draggy car, which in the data from qualifying, you can clearly see that. So there is still quite a bit to be improved. But yeah, they've got a good car, have Haas. They just need to unlock more speed. But yeah, what a result for them. Sixth, Kimi Antonelli. The reason he finished there was because he had a broken floor. Still a good result though, I think, considering that issue for him of 6th place. Keeps him in a decent position in the championship as well. Alex Albon 7th, good result for Williams. Oliver Behrman in 8th, what a result. He went from 17th up to 8th. What a brilliant drive from Behrman. 9th, Lance Stroll, and 10th, Carlos Sainz. So a good amount of points on the board for Williams, 7 points from the Grand Prix, which keeps them in a good position in the Constructors' Championship. And talking of the championships, let's go through the championship standings coming out of the Chinese Grand Prix. Lando Norris obviously on top, and then Verstappen not far behind in second. Russell only a point behind Verstappen in third. Piastri then a point behind Russell in fourth. Antonelli 5th, Albon 6th, Ocon now 7th, Stroll 8th, Hamilton 9th, and Leclerc 10th. Ferrari in such a miserable position after the first couple races. And then on the constructor side, McLaren starting to pull away in the Constructors' Championship. Just over 20 points clear of Mercedes-Benz, who are second, who will be pretty happy to be second at this point. Red Bull third, Williams in fourth, level on points with Ferrari. 6th are now Haas, 7th Aston Martin, 8th Sauber, 9th Racing Bulls, and Alpine last, the only team not to score a point, even though by now they really should have scored at least a couple points this season. But that is the championship standings coming out of this Chinese Grand Prix weekend. And one more thing before we get on to the front running teams and just how everyone did in China, let's get on to what the race pace was like during the Chinese Grand Prix. because, of course, we had no safety car, virtual safety car. We barely had a yellow flag during the event itself. But as you can see, McLaren, the quickest team, which is by no surprise. We all expected McLaren to have the best car in race conditions, but only 2 to 3 tenths quicker than Mercedes and Red Bull, which is very encouraging that Mercedes and Red Bull were not that far off compared to, I think, what we were expecting. Coming into the Chinese Grand Prix, I was expecting the next best team to be, at best, half a second a lap off the pace of McLaren in the race. So, for Mercedes and Red Bull to be, not too far away in race conditions is very much a positive, and shows that if they can just find that extra upgrade that can give them that extra, say, 2 to 3 tenths of a second, then, God, we are going to have some season and have multiple teams fighting, multiple drivers fighting for race wins going forward. Ferrari, the 4th quickest team, around half a second off the pace. Obviously, Ferrari in the sprint race were very good, but clearly other teams improved from the sprint race, and I think Ferrari were benefited by, with Lewis Hamilton in the sprint race running in clear air at the front. That really did help, I think, their situation. But yeah, Ferrari, even though, they got disqualified, their pace in general in the race was just not good enough. And even though this disqualification is really bad for them in terms of, they lose a lot of points from the disqualification, they have got bigger issues, such as where is their pace, because they are nowhere near quick enough right now to be winning Grand Prix, and that is just simply not good enough. And really, at the minute, you've got to say they're not really quick enough to be on the podium either. So, big issues at Ferrari. And then the quickest midfield team, Haas F1. Very, very impressive, and again showing the potential that car does have once they fix all the issues with it. Slightly quicker than Williams and slightly quicker than Racing Bulls, who, even though they went for an alternate or a 2-stop strategy, which ultimately didn't work, their pace in general was a bit more disappointing than I think what we were expecting. Alpine were a bit better in the race compared to qualifying. Sauber were okay, and Aston Martin overall actually weren't very quick. I think that's because Lance Stroll did so many laps on the hard compound tyre that he started on. I think he went, was it 37 or 38 laps into the Grand Prix? And obviously his lap times wouldn't have been very good. And then when he went to the medium, he only had a few laps of good pace, and then the pace on the tyre dropped off. So, Aston Martin's race pace not consistently good over the course of the Grand Prix like it was for Haas, Williams or Racing Bulls. But that's how the race pace was through the Grand Prix. And let's now go on to the race winners, McLaren. And it was a less comfortable weekend than really it should have been. Obviously, what happened with the sprint race was quite poor from McLaren. They should have been winning the sprint. Lando Norris had a really awful Saturday. Poor mistakes in sprint qualifying on the Friday, and then in the sprint race on the Saturday, he was absolutely terrible. Piastri, I think, did his best, really, but just the sprint qualifying just wasn't good enough from him either. But then, once we got to actual qualifying, Oscar Piastri delivered absolutely like he had to if he's going to assert himself in the championship conversation. Lando Norris, yet again, did not deliver a good enough lap in qualifying, and that's why he ended up third. Luckily for him, Russell was cut off by Piastri at the start of the Grand Prix, and that allowed Norris to fly around the outside, which really did help Norris's race, because I think if Russell had maintained ahead of Norris at the end of that first lap, I think Norris would have had a very tricky race to try and get past Russell. And ultimately, with the brake problem Norris had, I don't think Norris actually would have finished in second place. So that was absolutely crucial that Norris got into second the way he did on the first lap. Russell did get back past him at the first round of pit stops, but then with a great move up to turn 1, Norris got back into second. Luckily, held on to second despite the brake issue at the very end. But for Oscar Piastri, brilliant, absolutely brilliant performance. And like I said, he has asserted himself now in the championship conversation. And whilst at this point of the season, McLaren do have the best car, Piastri needs to strike against his teammate, because I'm pretty confident Red Bull will improve their car, maybe with this upgrade coming in Bahrain, maybe a bit later, and eventually Max Verstappen will begin his fight back to win his 5th World Championship. And whilst Red Bull are off the pace, that's when McLaren, with their drivers, need to really strike. And yeah, with Piastri and Norris, this is the real, I think, important part of the season to try and build as big of a gap over Verstappen as they can. Piastri obviously still behind Max in the championship, only by a couple points. But looking at the races coming up, Suzuka, McLaren, you would think, should win the Japanese Grand Prix with the car they've got. After that, though, in Bahrain, it could get tricky, especially if Red Bull's upgrade does work. But yeah, Piastri absolutely is a championship contender, especially given that he has now improved his weaknesses in terms of managing tyres, and mostly his weakness of qualifying at least as close to Norris as he can, when last year at times he was not getting close enough consistently to Lando over a single lap in terms of position. That seems so far to be fixed, so if he keeps it up that way, then Piastri, I think in a race situation, I would back Piastri over Norris, because Lando, as we saw last year, and even to a degree in the sprint race this past weekend, Lando is not trustworthy in a race situation. Not like Oscar is, in my view. So yeah, Oscar, absolutely a championship contender. There is no doubt about that. But yeah, McLaren, 2 wins in a row. First time they've won the first 2 races of a season since 2003, which was, 22 years ago. Obviously, that season they ended up winning nothing. But this season, I think, at least on the constructor side, they are going to be surely at least champions on that side, with especially the car they've got and the driver lineup they've got. But yeah, for the next Grand Prix, qualifying might not be easy, because I think certain teams behind them might be right there with them, fighting closely for pole. But as long as they get at least pole position, then they should win the Japanese Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. And then, like I said, after that, once Red Bull bring their upgrade, it's going to be interesting to see just how quick McLaren are compared to the rest after that point. But we will see how McLaren get on. Let's go on next to Mercedes-Benz. Yet again, another podium for George Russell. And what a weekend he had. He had a decent sprint qualifying and race. Ended up 4th in the sprint race, not too far off the podium positions there. And then, in qualifying, produced an absolute stonker of a lap to put himself on the front row of the grid. And within a 10th of pole position, it was, again, an unbelievable lap from Russell. And in the race, yeah, the start wasn't great for him. He tried to go for the lead, but Piastri very well blocked him off, and Russell had to lift out because there was going to be an accident if Russell had gone for the inside of turn 1. And that, of course, allowed Lando Norris to swoop around the outside of him and take second place. But then after that, Russell did keep quite close to the McLarens and kept them within arm's reach, especially Lando Norris. And then when we came to the first round of pit stops, the only round of pit stops for those front teams, Russell just about eventually got into a net second place. But then McLaren turned up clearly the engine mode on Lando's car, and Lando retook the position. A shame that Russell couldn't keep second, because I think, honestly, probably deserved second more than Lando did, purely from just having the better weekend that he did. But yeah, Russell, ended up third. Obviously, he was only a lap away from taking second if Lando, with Lando's brake issues, if it had been an extra lap, Russell definitely would have finished in second place. But it was a 56 lap race, and Russell just wasn't quick enough in the 56 laps to get the job done. But as I showed earlier with the race pace, very encouraging weekend for Mercedes to be within a tenth of pole and only a couple tenths of a second per lap slower than McLaren around a track that is pretty important for aero and grip in general. So that is really encouraging going forward. At the next Grand Prix, I'm not quite sure Mercedes will be as good at Suzuka. I don't think it's quite as good of a track for them as this Shanghai circuit was. But I can see them getting on the podium again. Absolutely. Especially with the good race pace they have compared to, say, a Ferrari or even a Red Bull at this point. So, yeah, very encouraging data. Very encouraging results. Mercedes are in a very good position, and they are another team just like Red Bull. Just need that one upgrade and they will be right there fighting for, and I think getting race wins. With the level Russell is performing at, there's no reason why he can't be a championship contender this season. The car fundamentally is good. It just needs more work on it. Just needs some more upgrades, and I think they'll get there. And I think for the first time, probably since 2020 or 2021, Mercedes has started the year with a fundamentally good car. Obviously not as good as the cars back in 2020 or 2021, but we've seen, last year, the year before, and the year before that in this ground effect era, how Mercedes would start the year with a poor car and then, essentially try to make the best of a bad situation as the season went on. That is not quite the case this year, and that is a plus. If Mercedes are going to win a championship this year, which is not out of the question, honestly, I'd say that at the moment. I think George Russell, you cannot right now say he is not a championship contender, especially if he can consistently score podiums and then once the car gets quick enough, start winning some races. He's absolutely a title contender. And if Antonelli could just improve his results a tad, then there's no reason why Mercedes can't maybe be a contender on the constructors' side either. So do not count out the Silver Arrows. They look very, very good to me. And again, they just need that little upgrade to push them forward. And I think they'll be right there fighting for wins and possibly both championships going forward. But really for Mercedes, not just for not next weekend, but for the next Grand Prix, if they could just consistently finish on the podium for the next 3-4 races, that would be good enough. And then once we get to Imola, Monaco time, that's probably when Mercedes are going to have to step it up and start having to fight for wins. But if they can just finish on the podium consistently, like I said, for the next 3-4 races, that is absolutely good enough and will put them in a decent position later in the season once they do improve this car. Antonelli, as I said earlier, I think very good result considering the floor damage he had. I think he picked it up on the first lap, did Antonelli? Not quite sure exactly, from who, but I think it was probably from the first lap. But yeah, 6th with that broken floor is still a good result. He's, 5th in the championship. Not a million miles away from the top of the championship either. Only, I think, 32 or 33 points. So I think Antonelli has had, in the races, in terms of the results, purely the results, I think a good start. We probably should be, though. I think once we get to probably Bahrain, I think we should start expecting a bit more. Purely the reason I say that is because the next Grand Prix at Suzuka, he's never raced there before. Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, though, the next couple races after that, he has experience, plenty of experience. So once we get to those tracks, then he should be really right up there with his teammate to a degree. So we'll see what Antonelli can do. But yeah, Mercedes, I'm very encouraged by them. I think I'm the most positive on Mercedes at the minute that I've been at this point of a season since 2021. It's been that good of a start. And again, I think fundamentally there is a good car there. They just need to bring a couple upgrades maybe, and they'll be right there at the top, no doubt about it. Let's go on though to Red Bull Racing quickly before we delve into the drama that is the Scuderia. Not really much to say, to be honest, about Red Bull. Max did the best job he could this weekend. Very, very good result in the sprint, getting third. That Red Bull car wasn't really quick enough for third, but he got it. Pretty decent result in qualifying, a fourth, and then great job to pass Leclerc the way he did at the end to claim fourth place. Obviously, both Ferraris were disqualified anyway, so he would have finished fourth anyway, but still, good job by Max. And overall, I think Max will be happy, not with the result of the weekend, but I think he'll be happy that, considering McLaren are clearly quicker than Red Bull, he is only 8 points behind Lando and is still second in the championship. He will be happy with that because he knows once that Red Bull car gets onto the same pace, at least of the McLaren, Max will start winning races and probably go on to win the championship because Max, even though we've only had a couple races, I think Max already has clearly shown why he is the best driver on the grid and in general in the world, because that car is definitely not the quickest, yet he is right there pretty much all the time so far. So, yeah, that's all he needs. It's just that one upgrade to put the Red Bull on par with the McLaren, and he will be absolutely fine. Because his level, I think, so far has been quite a bit better than what we've seen of Lando Norris in the first couple race weekends. And I would say probably the same for Piastri, no disrespect. The only driver that I think you could really argue has been at a similar level is probably George Russell. But I think Verstappen has been absolutely the best driver in these first couple races. Again, just perfection, really, from him, considering how quick, or rather how slow, the car is compared to where really Max needs to be. So, yeah, Max, I think, will be happy championship-wise where he's at compared to Lando Norris. But, yeah, he's just obviously keen for those upgrades to come. Liam Lawson looks like he's already done Red Bull Racing, because Ralf Schumacher, who is a pundit for Sky Sports Germany, came out and said that he's already heard from journalists, or was it Insider F1, one of those publications, that apparently the decision's already been made to replace Lawson with Yuki Tsunoda for the next Grand Prix at Suzuka. So, I mean, if that's the case, Liam, I know you may say, it's only been a couple races, but I don't think Liam really has much room to argue, because he has been so excessively bad in this opening couple races we've had that even a bit of an improvement still won't save him. And I don't think we're going to just see a magical big improvement from Lawson, going forward. What will be interesting, though, if that is true that Tsunoda's going to replace him for the next Grand Prix, what will be interesting is, will they put Liam back in the Racing Bulls car? I would like it if they did do that, because I don't think they should just completely discount Liam. I think there is still some worth there to keeping him round. But, yeah, he appears to be done at Red Bull. And, even with the disqualifications of the Alpine and the two Ferraris, he's still failed to score a point. So that just shows you how bad he has been. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Lawson, whether he is going to be in the Red Bull or not at the next Grand Prix. But it appears Lawson's Red Bull career has already come to an end. But yeah, not really much to say about Red Bull other than just improve the car. At Suzuka, I do think they've got a decent chance of a podium in that race, especially with the driver they've got at the wheel of Max Verstappen, who we know how insanely good he is around Suzuka. The last few years proves that. So, as long as he can be at his absolute best and the Red Bull car is close enough to, say, Ferrari and Mercedes on pace, then no reason why Max can't get on the podium, which would be a good result coming out of the Japanese Grand Prix. And now let's go on to the Scuderia themselves, who have returned to the clown show that we thought we had left behind, but it turns out that they were just hiding it all along. A disqualification for both Ferrari cars. And it was due, I believe, for both cars due to excessive plank wear. I'll just quickly have a look on my end to see the exact reasoning if I can. But I think at least with one of the Ferrari cars, it was the issue. Actually, I've got a statement here from Ferrari where it says Charles was on a one-stop strategy today. This meant his tyre wear was very high, causing the car to be underweight. With regard to Lewis's skid wear, we misjudged the consumption by a small margin and there was no intention to gain any advantage. So, basically the same reason that George Russell was disqualified at Spa back last year. That's why Leclerc was disqualified. And with Lewis Hamilton, it was a slight miscalculation on the skid wear. Now, these skid blocks is the reason why Ferrari's season has started off really so disastrously. Because in Melbourne, they started the weekend well, but then they had to raise the skid blocks by a decent amount to avoid excessive wear, which could have led to maybe a disqualification in Melbourne. And that's where they lost quite a bit of pace, probably 3-4 tenths, maybe even half a second in Melbourne. And it's come back to bite them to a degree at this Grand Prix. But I just can't believe that Ferrari have started the season this poorly. Yes, I know they won a sprint race, but that sprint race was not necessarily a true indication of how quick they are. I think what the sprint race and qualifying, maybe you could say sprint qualifying, but even qualifying itself, there were certain parts of the track that showed, data-wise, that Ferrari car does have potential. There is no doubt about it. There is potential in that car. But at the end of the day, it's about delivering the potential. And that's why McLaren are where they are. And same with Mercedes. They have got some decent potential in their car. And so far, they've delivered 2 podiums in 2 races. Ferrari, 0 podiums in 2 races. And they are, 60 odd points off the lead of the Constructors' Championship. And on the driver's side, their number 1 driver in the championship is Lewis Hamilton, only a point clear of Leclerc. And Hamilton is 46 points, I believe, off the lead of the championship. On the Constructors' side, I think it's already over. I don't think Ferrari are winning the Constructors. Absolutely no chance. McLaren, by the time we get to the European season, McLaren are going to be over 100 points clear of Ferrari. I wouldn't necessarily say it's absolutely dead and buried on the driver's side, but it's very well soon probably going to be the case. The only way they can turn this around, at least on the driver's side, is this next triple header we've got coming up of Suzuka, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. They need to win at the very least, they need to win one of those 3 races. You could argue they need to win maybe even 2 of those 3 races if they were to really get themselves back into the championship conversation. But at the very minimum, they need to win one of those 3 races. If they don't, then both the drivers and constructors championships are over for Ferrari in terms of them being able to win it. Because by the time we get to Miami, they'll probably be on the driver's side, 60, 70 points behind. And then, like I said, on the constructor's side, they'll probably be like 100 points behind or even further behind. In my view, the Constructors' Championship's already over. But on the driver's side, as I said, there is still a slight bit of hope, but they've got to win at least one of these 3 races coming up with this triple header. And then if they were to, let's say Leclerc, who I still think is going to be the number one driver for Ferrari this season, let's say Leclerc wins in Bahrain, which wouldn't be necessarily the biggest surprise in the world. That car should be pretty quick in Bahrain, plus we know how good Leclerc is around that track. Even if Leclerc was to win there, he would probably still need to be on the podium in Japan and Saudi Arabia just to keep the gap at a decent level and not allow McLaren or, Norris, Piastri, whoever's in the championship lead by the time we get to Miami, to be too far away. So that is how much of a knife edge this season is on now. Again, Constructors' Championship is over, but the driver's side, they've got to be absolutely bang on it with their results now, really for the next 3, maybe even 4 races. And if they're not, then total game over for 2025. I still think, obviously, they're going to win races this year. That car, I think, once they get some upgrades on it, will be good enough to win Grand Prix. But is it a good enough car to win the championship? I have severe doubts about that right now. Because not only results-wise have they failed just so hard in these first couple races, the car ultimately itself is still not good enough. As we saw in qualifying, they were, 0.3 of a second off pole, which wasn't the end of the world. They weren't miles off pole. They could have been a lot worse in qualifying. In the race, though, even though both cars were underweight, you saw they were 0.4 of a second on average per lap off the pace of McLaren. Even if Ferrari had this supremely quick qualifying car, which we have seen them have over the last few years at times, that is not a good enough race pace to be winning races. It just isn't. You can't win a race if you're half a second slower than, per lap than your main rival. Now, at Suzuka, I don't think that necessarily is going to be as bad. I actually think the Suzuka track will suit the Ferrari car quite a bit more than the Shanghai circuit, because in the high-speed corners, this Ferrari car is actually quite good. We saw that with the data in qualifying. They were right there with McLaren in the high-speed corners here in Shanghai in quali. But with the race pace, that still is quite an issue. So I think there is a decent chance they could end up with a podium in 2 weeks in Japan, but whether they can deliver the actual result firstly in qualifying that sets them up for maybe a good result in the race, we'll have to see, because that is the issue with Ferrari at the moment in terms of just performance versus results. Is, again, they've got potential in the car, but they're not delivering it in terms of the actual results. And again, this triple header coming up in Japan, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia is make or break for their season. I will be making a video on Ferrari, by the way, which hopefully will come out later this week, maybe start of next week, where we will go more so into why have Ferrari been just so bad so far this season in terms of results and, to a degree, pace, because already they're in such a dire position. We will get into that, but as far as Ferrari are concerned, starting in Japan, just make sure that you get on the podium. Third even is good enough, but just make sure that you are on the podium, because if not, and if they're 5th and 6th or something like that, then even if they were to go win in Bahrain, I think it'd be too little too late, because they'd be throwing away so many more points to McLaren, possibly Mercedes and Max Verstappen and the Red Bull as well. So it's amazing to say this, but I think we are already at the make or break stage with Ferrari in 2025. Those are the front running teams. Again, massive shout out to Haas. What a result. As long as they can just improve that top speed disadvantage they've clearly got, which I think is clearly down to drag. They've just got too much drag on the car. once they fix that, I think this car will be regularly in the top 10. It's definitely got the potential for that. A shame about Racing Bulls having the weekend or the race result they had, because they were so quick in qualifying. They looked so good, and then just threw it all away with the strategy. And then, also good result for Williams. A few points on the board, and they are still 4th in the championship, level on points with Ferrari. Who would have thought they'd be in such a good position after 2 Grand Prix? And things can definitely get a lot better, because obviously Carlos Sainz is not quite performing at the level we know he can perform at. So once he gets up to his best level, Williams are going to be in a pretty good position going forward. But guys, that is it for this podcast reviewing the Chinese Grand Prix. And just a reminder of what the content plan is between now and my next podcast, which will be the day after the Japanese Grand Prix on the 7th of April, I think that podcast will be. So yeah, later this week, hopefully, I will be uploading a video about why Ferrari have had such a disastrous start to 2025. And then a week later, the night before qualifying in Japan, I will be going live for a qualifying preview for the Japanese Grand Prix. Qualifying, just like this past Grand Prix, I will not be doing a watch along for qualifying, but I will be doing a watch along for the race. Now, the clocks here in the UK do go from GMT to BST on Sunday, so you may have to adjust your times in terms of what you think it is here in the UK, because I know I always say UK time to make sure that you guys know what time, once you make the calculation yourself, you'll know hopefully what time it is in your part of the world. I think the race here in the UK on that Sunday morning starts at 6 a.m. here in the UK. So I will be live at 4 a.m. UK time, obviously for the 2-hour build-up, then the watch-along. Nib, my co-commentator who joined me yesterday, he will be on yet again for this Japanese Grand Prix. And then the day after, obviously there'll be a podcast reviewing the Japanese Grand Prix. And then, as I announced during my stream for the race watch-along, I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch-along for both the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So both qualifying and race watch-alongs returning for those 2 races, mainly because the timing of those races for me is just way, way better. And of course, the day after those weekends have finished, I will be doing a podcast again, reviewing those Grand Prix. So between now and basically the end of Easter, which is in, I think, just under a month from now, a lot of content coming your way. So make sure, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe for more content like this, and make sure to smash a like button as well. Obviously does help the channel grow. But until that Ferrari video dissecting where 2025 has gone wrong so far, and until the next podcast reviewing the Japanese Grand Prix weekend, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.